The smell of burnt oil and scorched leather hung in the air of the Hargrove Estate motor court. The morning Vivian Hargrove stepped out of her helicopter and pointed at the wreck. "Get that eyesore off my property," she said, though her property manager, a narrow man named Curtis, was standing close enough to hear. "It's a paperweight, a very ugly, very expensive paperweight. Have the mechanic haul it to the scrapyard or sell it for parts. I don't care which, so long as I don't have to look at it anymore." The car in question was a 1965 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud 3, or what remained of one. A fire had taken the interior down to the springs. The front fascia was crushed. The coachwork along the driver's side had been peeled back by the guardrail it met on a mountain road in Calabria 2 years earlier, and the original cellulose silver paint, applied in a single patient coat at the Crew factory in 1965, had blistered and blackened in long diagonal stripes that made the whole car look like something grieving. The man who would receive it was loading a flatbed 20 feet away. His name was Daniel Avery. He was 34 years old, and he ran a modest restoration shop called Avery Motor Works out of a rented bay in a light industrial block in Gloucester. Worn canvas trousers, a gray Henley with a frayed collar, hands already dark with grease at 8 in the morning. He had come to collect a separate vehicle, a post-war Bristol he'd been hired to deliver, and he happened to be present when Vivian Hargrove issued her verdict on the Silver Cloud. What Vivian Hargrove did not know was that Daniel Avery had spent 11 years at the Rolls-Royce Heritage Restoration Program in Crewe, where he had been for the final 4 of those years, the youngest lead conservator in the program's history. Stay with this one through to the end. Every detail here is placed for a reason. He had left Crewe quietly when his wife, Claire, died of a cerebral hemorrhage on a Tuesday morning in November, 6 days after giving birth to their daughter. He had not gone back. He packed what tools he could fit in a transit van, moved to Gloucester to be near Claire's mother, rented the bay, and built something smaller and slower that allowed him to be home by 4 o'clock. The work was good. It was the kind of work that asked nothing of him except his hands and his judgment. And those 2 things he still had. Curtis approached him as he secured the Bristol to the flatbed's wheel straps. "She wants to know if you'll take the Silver Cloud," Curtis said, already checking his phone. "As a tip, basically. It's yours if you want it. Otherwise, she's calling the scrapper." Daniel looked at the Silver Cloud for a moment without expression. "I'll take it," he said. Vivian Hargrove was already back inside. She had not asked his name. The car was a disposal problem solved, and that was the full extent of it. Daniel walked slowly around the Silver Cloud. He crouched at the driver's side rocker panel and pressed one thumb into a seam near the B-pillar, holding it there. Reading something in the steel's resistance that a person would have had to spend years learning to read. He stood, pulled a small notebook from his back pocket, and made 3 entries in pencil, unhurried, the way a man writes things he already knows but wants to record anyway. Then he called his flatbed driver, a retired coach builder named Pete Fallow, and told him to bring the long trailer. "The Silver Cloud?" Pete said. "The Silver Cloud," Daniel said. A pause. "How bad?" "Bad enough," Daniel said. "But it's all there." That was the thing Vivian Hargrove had not seen. Not because it was hidden, but because she had not known to look. Beneath the burned leather and buckled coachwork, the car's structural monocoque was intact. The engine, a 6.2-liter V8 hand-built and bench-tested to tolerance measured in 10,000ths of an inch, had not burned. The fire had been interior only, fed by leather and felt and oxidized fuel in the carburetor bowl, and it had died when there was nothing left to feed it. The body damage was real, but bounded. The Silver Cloud was not dead. It was simply destroyed on the outside. And the outside was the part that could be rebuilt. Daniel Avery knew the difference. He had spent 11 years learning it. He locked the notebook in his pocket, walked to his truck, and drove to Gloucester. In the passenger seat, buckled in with the seatbelt looped through its handle, was a drawing his daughter Maisie had left under his windshield wiper that morning. A house, a car with round wheels, a figure with very large hands. She left him drawings sometimes, slipped into places she thought he would find them. Claire had done the same thing. He did not think about Vivian Hargrove on the drive home. He thought about the seam near the B pillar and what it had told him. The Silver Cloud arrived at Avery Motor Works 3 days later. Pete drove it in slowly, the flatbed clearing the door with perhaps 4 inches to spare, and the two of them stood looking at it once. It was down on the workshop floor. "She really gave this away," Pete said. Daniel pulled on nitrile gloves and began at the front near-side wheel arch, working his way back along the panel seams with methodical patience. There was a quality to the way he moved around a car, a kind of concentrated stillness, as if the car were talking and he were listening. "She did?" Daniel said. "She thought it was worthless." Pete looked at the caved fascia, the blackened interior, the peeled flanks. "From a distance," he said carefully, "it makes a case for itself." Daniel was already 3 feet into the engine bay, reading the block. He had told Maisie about the car over dinner the previous evening. She was 7, and she listened with the particular intensity of children who have learned that adults do not always explain things twice. She had her mother's dark eyes and her mother's habit of tilting her head when she was thinking. On the table before her, as always, was a small ceramic rabbit Claire had bought at a market stall in Bath when she was 8 months pregnant. Cream-colored, chipped at one ear, unremarkable to anyone who hadn't been told what it meant. "Is the car broken?" Maisie had asked. "Parts of it are," Daniel said. "Are you going to fix it?" "That's the plan." She rotated the ceramic rabbit a quarter turn. "You always fix the ones that look the worst," she said, because no one else wants to. Daniel looked at her for a moment. Then he went back to his dinner. She was not wrong. What had brought him to the silver cloud with such certainty was more specific than instinct. During his years at the Heritage Program, Daniel had worked on 6 Silver Cloud 3s, 3 factory restorations, and 3 private commissions. He had learned their architecture the way a surgeon learns anatomy, from the accumulated physical memory of having disassembled and rebuilt the same structures until the knowledge lived in his hands as much as his mind. He knew that the Silver Cloud 3's body-on-frame construction meant cosmetic devastation rarely penetrated to the structural members, that the factory's pre-treatment gave the chassis a corrosion resistance most restorers underestimated, and that the engine's hand-built tolerances often survived events that destroyed everything around them. He had written as much in a paper for the Heritage Program's internal journal in 2014. Nobody at the Hargrove estate had read that paper. Nobody there had known to read it. Day 1 was documentation. Daniel photographed every panel, every seam, every point of damage, front to back and top to bottom, and made a written condition report, 41 entries across 9 pages, each a precise description of a specific defect, its likely cause, and its treatability. Day 2 was the engine. He drained the old oil into a clean container and studied it, color, viscosity, the presence or absence of particles, before anything else. The oil told a story of a car run hard and infrequently and serviced badly, but not a story of internal catastrophe. He pulled the valve covers and found the camshafts clean under a film of old oil. He checked the bearing clearances with a dial gauge, recording each measurement in a separate column. Every reading fell within factory tolerance. The engine was fine, he told Pete on the morning of day 3. Pete looked at the measurement column for a long moment. "That doesn't make sense," Pete said. The car went into a guardrail. "At low speed," Daniel said. The fire was the drama. The crash was a parking incident. Pete looked back at the engine. "So the body, the interior, the paint, that's all cosmetic." "Not all. The near side front inner wing is cracked. The A-pillar on the driver's side has a twist I'll need to address on the jig. And the coachwork along the driver's side needs new aluminum sections in 3 places." A pause. "But the car is structurally sound, and the engine is original and intact." Pete was quiet. "What's a running original engine Silver Cloud 3 worth?" Daniel was already back at the valve cover. "We'll see," he said. The work deepened through the second week. Daniel stripped the entire interior to the bare floor, taking 2 full days because he was doing it slowly, cataloging what was salvageable before removing anything. The instrument cluster glass, the original veneer door cappings, the chrome switchgear. The steering wheel had survived intact. A 4-spoke wood-rimmed wheel, the wood dried and cracked, but present. The underlying alloy rim perfectly true. He set it aside in a padded tray like something recovered from a dig. On day 8, Maisie came to the shop after school. She stood at the bay's edge in her school uniform, backpack over one shoulder, studying the stripped silver cloud. "It looks worse now than when it came in," she said. "It always does at this point," Pete told her. She thought about it. "Like a wound," she said, "before it closes." Pete looked at Daniel. Daniel was measuring the A-pillar with a digital caliper and did not look up, but something in the set of his shoulders changed. A small, private acknowledgement. The aluminum coachwork sections arrived from a specialist fabricator in Coventry on day 11. 3 preformed fillet panels cut to Daniel's exact template. He had spent day 9 making those templates from scratch, tracing the undamaged passenger side panels to establish the correct compound curves, then transferring the geometry to paper and cardboard before sending the files. The fabricator was a man named Hargreaves, who had worked with Daniel at Crew. "Silver Cloud 3, Hargreaves said when the order came in. "It was in a fire," Daniel said, "and a guardrail, and someone thought it was scrap." A pause. "Those are the interesting ones," Hargreaves said. The panels fitted on day 12 with minimal adjustment. By the end of that day, the driver's side coachwork was closed and smooth, the seams tight in a way that took Daniel the better part of an hour per joint, working the metal by hand with a body hammer and a slapper block, reading the surface with his fingertips in the low, raking light of a single workshop lamp. A senior conservator named Robert Chalk had taught him that technique in his first year at Crew, standing behind him in exactly this kind of light, saying nothing, letting Daniel's hands learn by doing. Chalk had 40 years of coachwork in his fingers, and he had told Daniel once that the metal remembered what shape it wanted to be, and that a good metalworker's job was to listen and help it get back. Daniel had thought about that often in the years since Claire died. He thought about it now, running his palm along the newly joined coachwork in the quiet of the empty shop. By day 18, the structural remediation was complete. The A-pillar twist had been corrected on the frame jig, 3 days of patient incremental adjustment until the door aperture gaps matched factory specification within 2 millimeters. The inner wing was repaired with a welded section, dressed and primed and invisible. The front fascia had been removed, straightened, and refitted. The original chrome bumper sections sent to a plating shop in Birmingham, one of perhaps 4 operations in the country still doing triple plate chrome to original specification. The car was beginning to look like a car again. Maisie had taken to drawing it. She had started with the damaged version, and now her drawings showed a smooth-sided shape with round headlights and the Flying Lady mascot, rendered with great seriousness as a small stick figure with arms out. Daniel had pinned both drawings to the workshop corkboard, side by side. He kept the ceramic rabbit at home, on the kitchen shelf above the radiator, where it had sat since Claire's mother brought it over the first week after the funeral. Vivian Hargrove had spent the 3 months since the transaction not thinking about the silver cloud at all. The car was gone. The line item closed. She had moved on to other things. A property dispute in Monaco, a restructuring of the Hargrove Media portfolio, a wellness venture in which she held a minority stake. She was not sentimental about possessions. She had a fleet of 14 collector cars maintained by a specialist firm in Surrey, and the Silver Cloud had been, until its accident, one of the less notable members of it. She had given it to a mechanic. That was the word she would use later. In a conversation her personal assistant would overhear and recount. The flatbed driver's helper, the one with the grease on his hands. She did not know his name. She had not asked. What she also did not know was that Daniel had quietly contacted Dr. Philippa Strand, head of provenance and authentication at the British Motor Museum in Gaydon, to discuss the car's history. Tucked behind the firewall in a corroded bracket, Daniel had found a small aluminum plate stamped with a build number. He cross-referenced it against the Heritage Program's production records, to which he still had courtesy access, and established that this Silver Cloud 3 had been completed at Crewe on the 14th of March, 1965, and delivered the following April to a customer in Geneva. That customer's name, according to the delivery record, was Gianni Agnelli. He had driven it a single season before selling it through a Geneva intermediary. The trail went quiet for 2 decades, resurfaced in a 1987 Italian auction catalog, unsold, then again in a 1994 private sale, and finally in the Hargrove Estate's own acquisition records from 2006, where it appeared in a single spreadsheet line under Miscellaneous Coachwork, Provenance Unverified. No one had verified it. No one had thought it worth the effort. Daniel called Dr. Strand on a Thursday afternoon, standing at the workshop door with the build plate photograph on his phone screen. She was quiet a moment. When he read her the build number, "I'll need to see the plate in person," she said. "Send me the scans today." He did. She called back the following morning and said she would drive to Gloucester. Dr. Philippa Strand arrived on a Friday morning that smelled of rain and wet concrete. She was a small woman in her late 50s, her hair cut close, carrying a leather satchel that had seen considerable use. She did not look at the car immediately. She looked at Daniel, then at the workshop, then at the corkboard with its 2 pinned drawings, and something in her expression settled into quiet recognition. "The build plate first," she said. Daniel handed it to her in a clean cloth. She held it under the portable lamp and read the stamped numbers once, then again. She opened her satchel, removed a manila folder of printed records, and set the plate beside them. The delivery address in Geneva is a residential property owned by the Agnelli family from 1961 until 1973, confirmed through the Cantonal Land Registry, she said. "I've also spoken with the archivist at the Fondazione Giovanni Agnelli in Turin. They have a photograph from a villa in Arcore in the summer of 1965 showing a Silver Cloud 3 in this exact color with this body configuration. The plate, though partially obscured, is consistent with this build number. She placed 2 fingers on the cloth. This is the car. Pete set down his mug. Daniel said nothing. He was looking at the plate with the same calm expression he brought to bearing clearances, as if the confirmation was simply one more measurement that had come back within tolerance. Dr. Strand produced a letter on British Motor Museum letterhead, signed by herself and co-signed by the museum's Director of Collections, formally attesting to the car's provenance, build date, original owner, and historical significance as a documented example of a hand-built Silver Cloud 3 with unbroken chassis identity. When the restoration is complete, we would like to exhibit it, she said. We've spoken with Bonhams, who've expressed strong interest in offering it at their Goodwood sale in the autumn. She looked at Daniel with an expression that was professional and precise and carried at a depth she did not make explicit, something that might have been respect. You should know what this is worth, not roughly, precisely. She told him the figure. Pete looked at the ceiling. Daniel looked at the car. Vivian Hargrove received the call 3 weeks later. In the back of a car, somewhere between her Chelsea flat and a meeting she was already late for. Curtis read her the details in a flat, careful voice. The car, the provenance, the Agnelli documentation, the Goodwood estimate. When he finished, a silence lasted long enough to pass through 2 traffic lights. The mechanic, she said. The one with the flatbed. Daniel Avery, Curtis said. He runs a restoration shop in Gloucester. He was formerly the lead conservator at the Rolls-Royce Heritage Program in Crewe. Another silence. I see, she said. It was a different voice than the one she had used in the motor court. Lower, moving more carefully, the way a voice moves when the ground has shifted beneath it, and the speaker has not yet decided how to proceed. She asked Curtis to find out if Avery would take a meeting. She wanted to discuss whether there was an opportunity going forward, whether the Hargrove fleet might benefit from his particular expertise. Curtis relayed the message the following morning. Daniel listened to it standing at the workshop door with his coffee, looking at the Silver Cloud, which now wore its finished coachwork in bare primer, smooth and unbroken, waiting for paint. He called Curtis back that afternoon and said he appreciated the inquiry and that his schedule permitted a brief phone conversation in the next fortnight, and that he charged for consultations at his standard rate. He said it without warmth and without coldness, the way he read bearing clearances, accurately and without editorializing. He put his phone away and went back to the car. He was thinking about the paint, the correct cellulose silver, mixed to the original Crewe specification, a color that existed nowhere in any current manufacturer's catalog, and had to be formulated from archived records by a man in Shropshire, who was one of perhaps 3 people in England still doing it properly. It had a depth that modern 2-stage paints did not replicate, a quality of light that seemed to come from inside the surface rather than sit on top of it. He had ordered it 2 weeks earlier. It was arriving Thursday. He stood looking at the primed car for a moment. Its long, unhurried lines, the gentle tumble home of the rear quarters, the way the flying lady cast a small shadow across the bonnet in the afternoon light. And then he turned off the workshop lamp and locked the bay door. He drove home in the early evening, the last light going pink above the low rooftops of the industrial estate. When he pulled onto his street, the kitchen window was lit from inside, a warm yellow square against the gray. Claire's mother had been with Maisie that afternoon, and her car was still in the drive. And through the glass he could see the two of them at the kitchen table, the small figure and the larger one, sitting close. He sat in the truck for a moment, with the engine off. On the passenger seat, folded once, was a new drawing Maisie had left on the workshop bench before school. The car, finished and whole, rendered in silver crayon, with the stick figure flying lady, and a small figure standing beside it with very large hands. He picked it up and looked at it in the fading light. Then he went inside. There is a particular kind of knowledge that cannot be faked or abbreviated. The kind that accumulates only through years of patient, attentive labor, through hands that have learned to read what eyes alone cannot see. Vivian Hargrove had looked at the silver cloud and seen its surface. Daniel Avery had looked at the same object and seen its structure, its history, its potential. Everything, a life of disciplined looking, had taught him to find inside the damage. He had not been lucky. He had been prepared. He had spent 11 years becoming the person who could see what others dismissed, and when the moment came, he had simply done the work, unhurried and methodical, the way Robert Chalk had taught him in A Raking Light and Crew. The ceramic rabbit sat on the kitchen shelf above the radiator, chipped at one ear, exactly where it had always been. The car would be finished in the spring.